Let's imagine that God is a living person and he can't wait to be addressed. Helplessly, he has been watching our suffering for years. In fact, he's been suffering with us. But he only hears from our mouth that God damn this, and God damn that. Meanwhile, we have no idea what else is being held back by him, which could erase even that little good that is still left in our lives in a blink of an eye. And millions of people live their lives this way, surfing the waves of God's grace and long-suffering, oblivious to the gathering clouds above. I'll talk to God as soon as he invites me for a sip. I heard a couple of times. Only when there will be tangible evidence. There are lots of them, just not in the form we would expect. Anyone who believes that everything came from nothing believes in a greater miracle than those who believe in creation. That an explosion brought order and balance, or that if we give it enough time, chaos will suddenly become order. It didn't take long for our richly grooved brains to come up with the solution. After all, it's all just a matter of big numbers. That piece of stone in the dust will eventually start to move and speak if enough time is given. Or those clothes put in the washing machine finally fold themselves nicely. Stacked on top of each other, you just need to spin the drum enough times. The complexity and fine-tuning of the universe terrifies scientists, now more and more even hardline atheists, and the more advanced tools they investigate, the deeper they penetrate, the more evidence they find that there is something going on behind the curtains. But God skeptics say, even if the parameters of the laws of nature, or the parameters of the physical constants were even a bit different, we cannot be sure that life could not have developed. At least as we know it. Yes, the parameters have been seemingly tuned with unfathomable precision. But since we have no basis for comparison to another universe, probability calculations lose their meaning. This is how everything developed naturally, and life simply adapted to it. On the top of that, if we spin the cosmic roulette enough times, sooner or later there will be a universe in which everything comes together perfectly for life to appear, say the believers in the existence of a multiverse. The multiverse hypothesis is the ultimate solution with which everything finally falls into place. We can finally explain on naturalistic grounds why our world is the way it is, why everything is seemingly fine-tuned, prepared for a later intelligent life form for you and me. You want big numbers? Welcome to the universe of multiverse. Okay, even though there is currently no evidence for the existence of another universe, let alone an infinite number of universes, at least this hypothesis provides a perfect escape route for dealing with the problem without bringing God into the equation. According to its logic, yes, there will be a universe that is fine-tuned for life. It's inevitable, so much so that not only the parameters are going to be fine-tuned to the point life can exist, but within that already imaginable narrow range there is an even narrower one at which some of the parameters are seen to be optimized for scientific discoveries. Yes, you have heard it right. The range is livable and optimally discoverable at the same time in our world. Dr. Robin Collins, philosopher, pointed out in his work called The Fine-Tuning for Scientific Discoverability that among that 26 already seemingly fine-tuned constants that govern our universe, some of them is suspiciously well-tuned. He mostly examined the fine structure constant, what is a mystery by itself. The FSC quantifies the strength of the electromagnetic force between elementary charged particles, for example electrons and protons. It's a dimensionless physical constant, with an approximate value of 1 over 137, what is currently cannot be derived from any other source. If you'd increase it slightly, we could not have any open biomass fire at all. The energy emitted by burning wood would simply extinguish the fire. Without that, is very unlikely that we would have found out how to smelt and forge metals. And science depends on metals, so we would not have science. Looks like that this constant was adjusted just perfectly to kick off scientific discovery. What if we decrease the value of the fine structure constant? We're gonna face another problem. The resolving power of the optical microscope goes down. It happens to have just enough resolving power, max is 0.2 millionth of a meter, 200 nanometers, and that is the size of the smallest living cells we know, the mycoplasmas. For living cells, we cannot use electron microscope, although capable of much higher resolution, 0.1 nanometers, but the vacuum used during its operation would kill them. Did someone or something knew in advance that would happen? Only the matter of big numbers. Immediately you would like to know where this number for a coupling comes from. Is it related to pi or perhaps to the base of natural logarithms? Nobody knows. It's one of the greatest damn mysteries of physics. A magic number that comes to us with no understanding by humans. You might say the hand of God wrote that number, and we don't know how he pushed his pencil. We know what kind of a dance to do experimentally to measure this number very accurately, but we don't know what kind of dance to do on the computer to make this number come out without putting it in secretly. Richard Feynman, Nobel Prize laureate theoretical physicist. Let's look at the cosmic microwave background radiation, or CMBR for short, next. It is the cooled remnant of the first light that could ever travel freely throughout the universe. This fossil radiation, the furthest that any telescope can see, was released soon after the Big Bang. Scientists consider it as an echo or shockwave of the Big Bang. Since the CMBR originates from the Big Bang, it provides us with very important information about our universe on a large scale. The intensity of the CMBR depends on the photon to baryon, photon to protons and neutrons ratio, what is roughly a billion photon to every 1 baryon. Experiments have shown that within the margin of errors of the determined variables, around 20%, the photon-baryon ratio is such that it maximizes the CMBR. Thus, its usability for research is all-time high. Big numbers. And interestingly, in these major fields of science such as astronomy and biology, we have no better or alternative tools than these. If we had better tools than the cosmic background radiation to explore the universe, or the light microscope to study cells, we would have discovered them by now. Let's have a look at the origin of life researches. Whatever you hear or read, don't give in to it. To this day, scientists have not yet succeeded in producing a living cell. It has been being tried for about 70 years. Since 1952, Miller, Urey. They are not able to create a living cell, not even the building blocks of the building blocks necessary for life from given elements, due to the problematic nature of the chemical bonds, only by taking them from already living animal and plant cells and trying to put them together. The 4 classes of macromolecules that needed for life. Proteins are biopolymeric structures composed of amino acids, of which there are 20 commons found in biological chemistry. Proteins serve as structural support, biochemical catalysts, hormones, enzymes, building blocks, and initiators of cellular death. Nucleic acids. Deoxyribonucleic acid DNA and ribonucleic acid RNA carry genetic information, which is read in cells to make the RNA and proteins by which living things function. Its building blocks are trimers of nitrogenous base link to a pentose 5-carbon sugar that's linked to a phosphate. In this trimeric form, it's called nucleotide. Polysaccharides are the most form of carbohydrates that exist in nature. Their building blocks are the monomeric sugars. Lipids are various organic compounds that are insoluble in water. They include fats, waxes, oils, hormones, and certain components of membranes and function as energy storage molecules and chemical messengers. Their building blocks are fatty acids, glycerol, phosphate, and often ethanolamine. Proteins, building blocks, amino acids. These encode information. Nucleic acids, DNA and RNA. Building blocks, nucleotides, and before nucleotide you need to make ribose. These encode information. Polysaccharides or carbohydrates. Building blocks, monomeric sugars. These encode information. Lipids, building blocks, fatty acids, glycerol, phosphate, and ethanolamine. Their fluxional or non-rigid assemblies encode information. Every building blocks they use in origin of life research purchased and obtained from already living systems. In every laboratory dealing with the origin of life, the so-called relay synthesis is established, which essentially means that components A and B are used to obtain component AB, the reaction of the two compounds takes place, the existence of the resulting substance AB does come about, but it is so chemically contaminated that practically unusable for any further process. So they take the pure AB from a sterile container, and this goes on and on. It doesn't work for them within pristine laboratory conditions, but they believe that somewhere deep in the ocean next to a spring heated by a magma column it came together by itself. That a handful of hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, carbon, and phosphorus molecules, which are not living substances in the first place, somehow they got mixed up, entangled in each other, then they suddenly came to life. Not only did they come to life, but they began to develop in a chemically very hostile environment. But the big numbers and the billions of years, as it turned out, time does not increase the chances, but rather works against these very sensitive and unstable compounds. What about DNA? There are 3.2 billion letters, base pairs in a single human DNA in perfect order, which ultimately make up our genes. Of course, there are hereditary diseases that can alter this order. But just imagine a spiraling ladder with 3.2 billion steps, consisting of lifeless matter in perfect order, in such a small place that it is even hard to imagine. And this is in each of our up to 36 trillion cells. And that cell carries out metabolism, responds to stimuli, constantly repairs and reproduces itself. But let's look at something simpler, shall we? Because life had to develop from something much less complex if we can believe in evolution. Let's look at a rudimentary living cell. The number of base pairs in the DNA of an average bacteria ranges from 580,000, Mycoplasma genitalium, through E. coli 4.7 millions, up to the big ones such as Myxococcus xanthus 9.45 millions. The genes of the Syrangium cellulosum can span over 13 million base pairs. Let's look at the DNA of the Mycoplasma genitalium because it has the fewest ladder rungs. According to the current state of science, this is the simplest living organism that can sustain itself without having parasitized other bacteria as a host. Mycoplasma genitalium is found almost exclusively in reproductive organs of mammals. Its presence usually does not cause symptoms. It approximately viable for 1 hour outside of the body out of watery environment. So scientists chose it as the subject of the Minimal Genome Project because of its simplicity. But since those 580,000 base pairs and 482 genes still seemed like a lot, they decided to take out everything that could be taken and leave only what is essential. Thus, they managed to reduce the number of genes to 382 and found that with less than this, one of the vital functions indispensable for further survival of the bacteria would be lost. Such as copying DNA, transcription, turning DNA into mRNA, translation, decoding mRNA into amino acids, DNA repairing, homeostasis, determining what can enter and leave the cell, and producing energy, making ATP molecules. If there was a first cell, in terms of complexity, it had to be close to this, and all functions had to work flawlessly from the very beginning. There was no time to wait for any of them to develop on demand. The most common theories in origin of life suggest that at some point in the prebiotic chemistry a replicase emerged. A replicase is a molecule that can copy itself and possibly other similar molecules. For a multitude of reasons, it is suggested that among molecules that we have in modern life, RNA is the most suitable chemical to have taken the role of replicases in early Earth. RNA is a polymer very similar to DNA that can store genetic information, but also can fold into an enzymatic structure and help in catalyzing chemical reactions. Even though catalytic RNAs with impressive capabilities have been discovered, we are still a long way from finding a good enough replicase that can self-replicate with a high enough performance. You see, it's called the catch-22 of self-replication. In order to have a high-efficiency replicase, you need a complicated molecule. In order to copy a complicated molecule, well, you need a high-efficiency replicase. The problem is that DNA is not even the most complex part of a living cell. Let's look at the cell membrane. Its task is to maintain homeostasis inside, letting in what is needed and throwing out the waste. This task is performed by 40+ different loopholes with amazing precision. Just to name some of them: ATP synthase, natrium potassium ATPase pump, zinc transporter, secretory proteins, ABC transporter, aquaporins, lipoglycan, phosphate transporter. In addition, 40+ different types of transporters. Tasks of the cell membrane includes maintaining correct pH level, maintaining correct salinity and osmotic pressure, electrical insulation, identifying waste and exporting it, identifying needed molecules and opening specific doors to let them in, blocking toxins and invaders, energy harnessing and growth template. Suffice to say, it's a highly complex system. So the task the scientists have to face is not trifling, and as Professor James Tour, chemist and nanotechnologist, said in many of his interviews, the goalpost is just moving further and further away every year. But let's suppose that somewhere under a rock or inside a volcano it all suddenly came together. This whole little world by itself, the DNA, the cell membrane, the ribosomes, the whole thing, what is basically a microscopical automated factory. There is still the big question: where has the very first blueprint come from? Who wrote the first program? Because DNA carries the code of the entire biological map of every living being. There had to be someone or something who decided the order of the base pairs, the order, size, and function of the genes, so that the information was not a jumble thrown on top of each other. I am talking about the very first cell, before enzymes and any complex proteins. The evidence for God's existence is everywhere. You just have to look around in nature. When I see a beautifully carved table or piece of furniture, whatever, I don't even need to see the master to know that it has been created by an intelligent living being gifted with creativity, imagination, and talent, let alone a Swiss watch. And a Swiss watch cannot be mentioned in the same breath with the simplest single living cell when it comes to complexity. The fact that God does not show himself directly every day has a function. This is a pivotal question too I meet on a daily basis. And here is my theory. He wants to see how you react when he gives you the illusion of independence. He wants to know what's inside your heart, how you treat others, or what you're doing when you think no one can see you. This is the only way he can call out your true nature. Just as a small child behaves completely differently when he knows his parents are either watching him or not. So, since God is omnipotent, he could operate our world with just his thoughts or magic words, but then the point would be lost. He gave us a world where everything seems to work perfectly by itself, and thus his person can remain hidden, giving us the opportunity to freely exercise our love and our free will. But perhaps most importantly, he wants to see how you will react if there is no other connection between him and you other than a thin yarn of faith. Will you miss him? Will you search for him? God has displayed his unimaginable genius by building this reality exclusively for us, just so he can get an answer to this pivotal question. Just for a thought, let me go back a little to the first part of the series, where we discussed why God allows so many terrible things to happen to innocent children. Let's play with the idea that this world was created to test us physically, mentally, and emotionally, but above all, God wants to test our faith through it. This is why this whole creation is made, and it is also the foundation of the whole design. Now imagine a world in which children do not get seriously sick until the age of 18, and they are not taken away by any disease or disaster since the beginning of time. Not a single child. If it cannot happen to one child, why should the other be an exception? Their lives could not be violently ended either. Something would always come up, or they would just magically be saved. And so it would go like that since the beginning of time. Sounds like a fantastic world to me. But what would be our first thought right away? We would immediately know that some kind of higher intervention is working in the background. And then the whole divine plan would immediately lose its meaning. Check out the previous video and give me your thoughts about this important topic. Our Creator is alive and well, and we have no idea how much He loves us, but if we do not seek His company, if we do not build our personal relationship with Him, He will respect the right of free will and our choices. But then we will also have to respect His decisions when He won't provide His protection during difficult times. Also, God understands and accepts if you want to spend your life without Him here on earth. The problem is you will have to spend eternity without Him also in the next one. It is worth considering to take a chance on Him. You have nothing to lose. In the other case, you will lose everything. Those billions of religious people are not necessarily weak-minded or unable to bear the reality that is weighing on them without the thought of a benign higher power. They must really feel the Creator in their hearts. I'm sure they get feedback in their dreams or other ways. Their prayers work and their lives are better because they play by the right rules, because they are aware of the existence of the rules. And deep inside they smile because they know that no matter what difficulties life throws their way, they will always have an invincible ally. That unexplainable, endless source of peace and joy in their heart tells them. What was only a thin thread of faith in the beginning, thanks to their perseverance, it has really developed into a real communication and relation between God and them. Because the Lord rewards those who persistently seek Him more than anybody else. Have you ever tried to pray, my beloved friend? Because time has come to face reality the world has been trying to understate and hide from you. Or don't you want to walk the only path that leads to life while holding the hand of truth? God bless you. And thanks for watching.